Hi, Robert.
Hi, Mushtaq. It's Friday again. Great to see you.
It is Friday again, and it's our session, and I'm really looking forward to the chat. And great to see you too. So today, it just so happened that there is something in the news during the week, and I wanted to talk about it. Um, the China South China Morning Post has put an article stating that over the past couple of years that the Ministry of Education in China has been really pushing the universities around the country to overhaul their degree offerings. And that resulted in either revoking or suspending some 12,200 degree programs. And these degree programs are termed obsolete. They are mainly in the humanities, languages, and even in management. And they are replaced by some 10,000 or so new programs that are really focusing on artificial intelligence, embedded intelligence, and things related to the new technology. Of course, this is done in response to a very high youth unemployment. The youth unemployment in China is now around 16%. So it's the need to act is understandable. But the question that I wanted to discuss with you is this a good move, a bad move, an early to tell kind of move, and should other countries and universities do a similar thing to what has the Chinese government decided to do?
Thanks.
Your
So
thoughts?
I too read the same coverage. It was really striking in a number of different ways.
Mm.
So I'll think out loud in your company for a moment. One of the things to observe is, of course, that university portfolios of degrees, our product catalogue, of course, it changes.
Mhm.
Universities have been around for centuries. And so there are things that are still there, but there are new things at different points. I mean, I've spent my lifetime, as you know, mostly in business schools. And business schools have a slight chip on their shoulder in the university sector because we're seen as a relatively new and young subject in that we're not medicine or law or philosophy, these traditional subjects. So it's not unusual that universities change the nature of the degrees that they offer. The second thing that really struck me was the sheer scale. And so I think particularly living in Scotland as I do, which is a country of about 5.5, 6 million people, when you hear the numbers for China or India, these really enormous countries with enormous populations, 12,000 degrees is a lot, isn't it?
It
There's
is,
a
yeah.
question of scale. The third thing that struck me was in different countries with different governance arrangements, some governments are very, very directive, and others
Mm.
are much more transient or passive in their engagement. So I think in the UK, if the Westminster government in the UK wanted to instruct all 140 or 50 universities to change, it'd be quite a difficult thing to do because our universities might just ignore that advice or not enact it
Mm.
very quickly. So I was struck by the sheer size and the pace of the change as just observations about the press
Yeah.
release. But the thing that it really prompted in me was a reflection about whether it is the right thing to do or not.
Mm.
And on the plus side, it is definitely true that the technology is changing at such a pace that you think, how would we equip the workforce of the future? That's a thing we have been talking about in these podcasts. And so understanding the digital and disruptive nature of generative AI and the integration between software and hardware, profoundly interesting in lots of different industries. And I can imagine employers saying, what I'm really looking for are graduates who know how to navigate this space between digital and physical infrastructure, for example.
Mm.
But there's a part of me, which must mean that I'm getting old, that says, well, but these subjects that they're cutting around the humanities and social sciences are the bits which are so quintessentially human they're probably the bits that are most resistant to the AI bug. The bits that you cannot do, the creativity, the inherent, I don't know, the importance somehow of studying things which are ancient. People have been thinking about what makes people healthy and happy, what makes good communities, what makes good political governance for nation states. They've been thinking these things for centuries and centuries, and the idea that that gets swept aside because it doesn't have a direct job, to some extent, I think, misses the point of education. Of course, there's a focus on employability, but universities weren't set up as employability factories. They were set up as seats of learning. So
Mm.
I think it is both impressive, the rate at which a nation has changed its product portfolio. I can see the drivers of it, but I am not sure that 100 years from now, people will say that was a great idea.
Mm. So I had very similar thoughts, Robert, and I was actually talking to a colleague of mine who admired the move, and she was telling me, you know, when would the Western universities be bold enough to make some big decisions like that? And the note I want to make first is that I agree with you that universities are not only about careers and employability and getting a job. I think university is about getting ready for life, but part of being ready for life is the ability to get a very good job and being able to add value. So I don't see contradiction between getting people to be ready for life and part of that getting them ready for work. I think the issue, the challenge, the trap that we as universities and university professors fell in is when we focus only on employability. And I, just like you, believe the AI will make the need for the humanities and social sciences even more, but not in the way that they are taught now. So I'm not giving the university an easy way out and saying you just hang on to whatever you have now. We need to do things differently. We need to make them more interesting and more exciting and more challenging and more enriching. Then they will be our pathway to have what I call sometimes the human advantage. You see, with AI, I believe that we'll, in a year or two, in a very short time, we'll reach a stage where everybody is using AI. Actually, if you don't use AI effectively to deliver the work that you are doing, the service that you are doing, or the service you are delivering, you won't be able to compete. But when everyone is using the same AI, then everything will be the same. And that is the time when we will need the human advantage. And I think the part that I'm not sure of, are we in humanities really preparing people to add that additional value? And I think that is the existential sort of question for universities. When we started this conversation, we did not really think that we are going to focus on universities that much. But I think we are somehow going back to the universities because they are struggling, they're having financial challenges, and and they are the place where our most clever people are. Then how are we going to respond to this? So I think employability is important, but only as part of building a holistic human being rather than just building a worker. One last thing I want to say before I want to hear you. If you look at the World Economic Forum list of skills that are required to be highly successful, for the most of this century, was one of the top skills was coding or software engineering or something like that. And that remained there until ChatGPT was released. And then we realized that AI, the first thing that actually did well was coding. And that skill first went very down, and I think down the list. And I think now it just totally disappeared. So the reason why I'm saying this is when someone or a government does that wholesale change to its programs, which I think will have implications to the kind of professors that they have to teach it, the research that is available to support it. If that decision wasn't the right decision, and then the professors get to retire or upskill themselves and do something else, and how quickly we'll be able to restore that humanity core, which I actually believe we will be needing.
Yeah. So in my subject area, which is strategy, one of the things that is observable is that it takes a long time to build the skill set, or what the literature calls the capability to do something. It can take decades, really. So in order to become great at something, you need a deeply embedded skill set, and you have to train people, and it's, it's part cultural, it's part process. But once you've stopped it, it's really hard to you can't just
Mm.
reinstitute it. And you
Yep.
see that at the level of nation states, in relation to, for example, shipbuilding. So in Scotland, there was a long tradition of shipbuilding. There's only one commercial shipyard really left now in Scotland. Um, and as that work has migrated to other parts of the world, including where you're based, if you stop doing an industry of that sort, all of the expertise dissipates, and it's a complicated web of suppliers and skilled individuals and manufacturers, and so that ecosystem withers really quickly. And so
Mm.
if you were to stop humanities research or teaching in a university, something which might have taken centuries to build up, won't just be recreated in a few years' time because you'll have lost all of that expertise. It does strike me that universities are having something of an identity crisis in the wider world. What are we for? Because we are partly perceived by parents of the students that we get for our undergraduate programs as for their future employability, as you have said, but we also serve other purposes. And I can't help thinking that this blend of critical thinking and broader multidisciplinary expanding horizons type education, this traditional liberal arts mentality of what a good critical thinker is really important and needs blended with, not replaced by, other types of education. But I'm going to turn our tack just a little bit and so that might be heard as in defence of universities doing what they've always done, and so let's not change. I'm just going to turn the table a little bit and apply a different logic. Whilst you were saying that your colleague was criticising, would Western universities ever begin to change that rapidly? If you look at the very simple process of product development, if I call it that, how do we decide to stop teaching mechanical engineering and start teaching some other variation of engineering? I do think universities are certainly the ones that I have worked in, and I know you've worked in a few universities too. If you think how long that takes us to do, you're talking about a development cycle which could easily be a couple of years.
Mm.
And, if industry is calling out for a particular set of skills, I don't think as a sector, universities are as good as they could be at listening deeply to what the lived experience of work looks like now, or future work
Mm.
looks like,
Mm.
taking that into a meaningful conversation with academic experts who would design the curriculum, navigating with professional standards bodies, whether that's in engineering or medicine or accountancy, or as to what chartered status looks like, and then configuring a new degree program. And you and I both know, and I suspect have both sat in conversations, which is, oh, the world is very different now. And, 4 years later, we have a slight change to the description of the degree title, but many of the same modules are still there, and many of the assessments are still quite traditional. And I think part of our identity crisis as a sector is about trying to blur the boundary between the university and industry and the world of work in ways which are more creative than we have been able to demonstrate in our current practice.
Mm. I think the challenge that AI particularly is setting for us goes beyond just the kind of jobs that we need to prepare our graduates for. I think goes into the area of how we teach and what we teach and how do we assess. So, and that requires some really some quick reflection and maybe change, because you know, the report is one of the key ways that we thought is dynamic, flexible, for us to challenge and test our students. So you give them a topic to think about it critically, write a piece, structure their thoughts, and now the allure of having AI and producing something very quickly to actually a very reasonable, sometimes actually quite good quality, is real. And then students use AI to write this. In the past, we used some tools to find if there is any plagiarism, but now this is also becoming very challenging. And some university tried it, and you know, it gets you involved sometimes with legal battles with some students who may have written the thing, and then you think that they did it with AI. So the assessment and the way we teach uh, clearly needs to change, while at the same time, uh, people who are the graduates, the students, need to be ready for that new world. So if I put on the map maker kind of hat, because this actually we are having this conversation because literally the terrain changed, the terrain in which we are working has changed, and then some countries are responding by let's change the degrees, some are doing it in different ways, some are just saying, oh, maybe nothing will happen, so let's just keep doing the same thing that we've done over the past century. But as a map maker, I think there are a couple of things that universities should seriously consider doing. So the first thing is, I think we need to change the way we do the assessment, and particularly the part that can be done by the students using AI easily, and it's very difficult to be detected. So while I still think we should ask the students to write reports to structure their thought, we should encourage them to engage with that process very, very seriously. But I think the 5 minutes that we use, or 10 minutes to report, to mark the report, should be used to have a quick conversation with the students to check how much they have learned, what are the thoughts what are the things that challenge them, and through that we, hopefully we get a better idea of how much they have learned. So that's just an example. Of course, there are many other things that we could be doing. So this is from the assessment point of view. From a curriculum point of view, I would like us to consider putting the curriculum in three main buckets, three main parts, almost equally, having the equal amount, maybe 30, 30, 30 or something like percent or something like that. So the first part should focus on things that are related to reality and the nature of reality, and the nature of the human condition. So for example, is calculus now, was calculus when it was invented by Newton or whoever is competing for that honor, and it will be calculus in 100 years from today. So that bit, let's focus on it. Let's actually teach it in the best possible way, and let's utilize the technology to teach it. But people need to learn about calculus. I think people need to learn about physics. I honestly feel physics now is so important because it talks about what is real, and the nature of reality, that almost everyone needs to know to do a course of physics. Likewise, things related to philosophy: what is right, what's wrong, what is beauty, what is the nature of the good life. I think these would need to be sort of the core offering of any program. And things related to psychology: what makes us humans, and what are our shortcomings, and so on. So this is one bucket. The other one, which I actually suggest that we teach using no technology or as little technology as possible is the part about who you are as a human being. Where is your superpower? Where is your purpose? Discover your purpose, write what I call an impact statement, reflect on that, and really spend 20-30% of your time knowing yourself. And you go to the university to really discover who you are through different encounters, through that work with an impact coach. That it has to be very structured, not something like it's left to chance, or if you want to do it, this has to be built in, quality assured. And in that bucket also, I would put things like critical thinking. How do you tell, fact and truth from falsehood? How do you assess things, and so on? Then there will be, and for that also, there is some sort of permanence. I don't think we need to change it that much. And then the last bit would be the part that it's part of our promise as universities. It will change every semester, because this is about the new tools that were just released, and then the AI that will make you more effective as an engineer or as an artist or whatever. So then I think we have a map that we could tell people, look, you could still do philosophy or management or engineering or marketing or foreign languages, and you will still remain ready to be relevant in a future world. Because currently, it's actually while the governments are responding to the challenge of employability, parents and students are also asking themselves this question of, which degree should I do? Which course should I join? Which is, again, you and I think, agree it's not necessarily the most helpful question, because everyone will have a different course and a different program that's suitable for them to bring their potential to the highest level. So this is the 30%, 30%, 30% of what is core, what is you as a human, project you, and what will change on a semester basis, because this is really connected to the industry. Maybe is an alternative map that we will need to consider and adopt.
So I notice your 3 buckets add up to 90%. That leaves me 10% for a 4th bucket, which is great.
Absolutely.
My 4th bucket would be make something.
Mm.
And so we've been talking in our conversations about map making when the world is changing around you and nobody's done this before.
Yep.
I'm really struck as you were speaking by the fact that there are some things you can only learn by doing.
Yes.
So if we had a degree program in riding a bicycle, you could sit lots of exams about how round the wheels are or how effective the brakes are, but you could still never have actually ridden the bicycle.
That's right.
You could study music theory, but not play a single note.
Yep.
And so there is something about the enactment of the learning, which I think is hugely powerful and should be in a space which is led partly by the individual learner, like what do I want to produce, and partly in a dialogue with what do I want to do. So it might be in an organization or a company or with a potential employer. So the project of doing something, I think, would bring together the other 3 buckets.
That's right. That's right.
And that has to be in some way assessed. It can't just be in your spare time or because you quite liked doing it. So if you have 3 buckets at 30% each, that leaves me room for a 4th at 10%. But I would argue that the balance might need to shift a little across the buckets. But I really like the framing of that. And it also reminds me that I've worked at the University of Glasgow on 2 separate occasions, and it's a big and brilliant, but also very old university. And up until 40 or 50 years ago, every student, regardless of what you studied, had to study some philosophy.
Yeah.
So in your first bucket, there was philosophy plus bits of physics and bits of maths or calculus, or maybe some of that should be about coding and computing science, or, so that one understands the technology that
And
you're going to
psychology
use.
as well.
And
Psychology.
psychology, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. And actually, in some ways, that's quite an ancient idea that a well-rounded learner has to understand something about the nature of some fundamentals.
Mm.
But my pitch would be let's have a making thing as well.
Mm. I agree. As a matter of fact, maybe I also felt that that making is embedded, but I think you're right. We need to elucidate it in a very clear way because, as you know, all of my students, for example, after they articulate their purpose in the first semester of their studies, it is a requirement that those who have a similar sense of purpose to come together and to raise money for an NGO that uh, they are sort of inclined towards or their purpose is aligned with. And often, some of them, as we start, they say, you know you are asking me to go and beg for money. I don't like to raise money. And of course, even those who do raise funds for a living, they don't like asking other people for money. It's not easy, and it really pushes your limits. But actually, when you do it for a cause that you believe in, it's very different.
Yeah.
And I think that notion of learning entrepreneurialism through raising funds for some purpose or cause that is very close to your heart is very important. By I agree with you actually that even a physical thing is an important thing. Like we are, there's a reason why we have these hands, and there is a reason why there are theories that one of the drivers of our development is that humans have very versatile hands that they could make tools with, and they grab things in a precise way that other animals would really struggle with. And while we have machines that doing a lot of things for us, actually having that skill of cutting the salad in a certain way, or using a screwdriver, or doing some soldering is very helpful, and I think sometimes even therapeutic. So I think you're right. Maybe we need to make that doing something that goes through all of them, take a little bit of the percentage, but there is doing in philosophy, and there is doing in purpose, and there's of course doing when you use the tools to learn.
Yeah. So one of my favorite academic papers has this at its heart, this idea of how one learns something, and it's called something like an epistemological dance, and it's about the relationship between learning and knowing. And so I think there is something about the doing of things, whether that is to produce a physical artifact or to produce some digital code or a piece of art, or it's the making of something that brings it from
Mm.
one part of your learning process into another. I think that's hugely important. And just, I guess we better draw to a close, but this, if you pointed us towards the article about the behavior of the Chinese universities under a direction to innovate and refresh their programs, I was reading something this week about the University of Manchester, which is another big university in the UK, making a promise that in future all undergraduate students will have some kind of work-related learning part of their experience.
Yep.
And I was reflecting that at Northumbria University, where I used to work, we had just made a commitment of that sort, that by 2030 every undergraduate would have a part of their curriculum which was experiential learning. And of course, the challenge in doing that as a provider is, if you've got tens of thousands of students, how do you find those work opportunities for people? But that is, I think, part of the answer to this existential challenge that we started this conversation about the relationship between learning for its own sake and for the kind of the sheer joy of knowing these subjects in the arts and humanities, versus the kind of relationship to the world of work, and not placing them in opposition to each other, but placing them in the same space.
Mm. I think that is going to be the challenge for all of us, and partly the older, more established universities, and the way we would respond to this will be very important, not only to the survival of the universities, but actually to the future of humanity. I mean, you and I are very biased because we really believe universities are not, a nice thing to have. They are an essential part of the community. They're very precious, very special. And while we agree that they need reform, I think we need to do that in a way that, preserve all of that culture and heritage that we had. And these are things that societies invested hundreds of years and huge amount of effort and resources in achieving. So I hope that, and I'm actually actually, to be very honest with you, I'm very hopeful and very optimistic that we will find a way. But I'm hoping also that these conversations do contribute to that. And I think having provocations like that, drastic way of reforming things in China is a good thing, because it provides an angle and provides something to compare with, and also provides something to watch as as it progresses.
Well, we'll see how many of the 10,000 new degrees that they've introduced are still here in 100 years' time.
Well, or in a 10 years time.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. It was great to have the chat with you, Robert, as usual, and I look forward to our next one.
Yep, great. Thank you, Mushtaq.
You're welcome. Thanks.